The thick fog crept like a shroud of death over Buffalo Naval Park, where the USS the Sullivans lay silent, its rusted steel hull resembling a giant corpse in the moonless night. Cold wind from Lake Erie howled through the aging cannons, carrying with it faint moans, as if trapped souls were crying for help from deep within the ship. The narrator stood on the pier, his trembling flashlight casting light on a pale face, eyes shimmering with a mix of curiosity and fear. "Welcome to the USS the Sullivans," he said in a low voice, as if afraid of waking something that slumbered in the dark. "This is not just a World War II destroyer. It is a steel tomb haunted by the curse of the 5 Sullivan brothers, George, Frank, Joe, Matt, and Al, where the darkness feels alive, and where you're never truly alone." The ship stood there, cold and still, but the air felt heavy, burdened by restless spirits. In 1942, the 5 Sullivan brothers died together when the USS Juneau exploded under enemy fire. The narrator continued, his voice quivering as a creaking sound echoed from the deck, like metal groaning under the weight of the past. Their sacrifice led the US Navy to name the ship in their memory, but that tragic death also left behind a curse that cannot be broken. People say the souls of the 5 brothers, along with dozens of other sailors, still linger aboard the USS the Sullivans. He stepped onto the gangway, flashlight piercing the dim steel corridor, where darkness seemed to devour the light, leaving only strange scratches on the walls, like fingernails clawing at metal. Visitors have reported hearing crying in the night, the steady footsteps across the deck, and the feeling of being watched by invisible eyes, he whispered, his voice faltering as a clanging sound rang out from afar, as if something heavy had been dropped. Some have even seen 5 shadowy figures standing in formation on the deck, their eyes glowing a ghostly white, as if guarding the ship from beyond the grave. He paused, the flickering flashlight illuminating a heavy steel door, slightly ajar, revealing a depth of darkness within. Tonight we'll explore the 3 most haunted areas of the USS the Sullivans: the deck where the brothers appear, the control room where whispers give orders from the dark, and the sleeping quarters where dreams turn into nightmares. A sharp, icy gust of wind blew past, carrying with it a sound like a whisper, "Stay." The narrator flinched, spinning around, but there was only darkness. "They know we're coming," he said, voice trembling. "Let's step into the curse of the 5 brothers." The narrator stepped onto the deck of the USS the Sullivans, his legs trembling as they touched the rusted steel floor, where fog from Lake Erie slithered like invisible fingers, wrapping around the old cannons. Pale moonlight pierced through the mist, casting distorted shadows on the ship's surface, as if it were breathing, alive, despite lying silent for over 7 decades. "This is the deck," he whispered, his voice tense, as if afraid to awaken something lurking in the darkness. "This is where visitors report seeing 5 figures, the Sullivan brothers, standing in formation, as if still guarding the ship from beyond the grave." The wind howled, carrying a strange sound like synchronized footsteps, but when he turned around there was only fog and shadow. His flashlight beamed over the cannons, and for a moment, he swore he saw 5 faint, tall figures standing silently at the end of the deck, their eyes glowing with a pale, ghostly white. "They don't move, don't speak," he continued, his voice shaking. "They just stare, like they're trying to pull you into their world." He placed an EVP recorder on the icy steel floor, hoping to capture a supernatural sign. After a few seconds of silence, static crackled, and a weak, distorted voice whispered, "Stay with us." The narrator flinched, his flashlight fell, its beam dancing wildly across the deck. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, breath quickening. A museum staff member once said that one night, he tried to approach those figures, but they vanished into the fog. Yet the feeling of being watched never left. He picked up the flashlight, its beam shining on a cannon, where a fresh, deep scratch had appeared, as if carved by invisible fingernails. The scene shifts to the control room, a cramped, suffocating space where dusty old dials sit frozen under the dim red glow of emergency lights. The air was heavy as if time had stopped, yet something still moved in the shadows. "This is the heart of the USS the Sullivans," the narrator said, his voice fading as a sharp metallic clang rang from the steel wall. "But now it's the place where whispers never cease. voices giving orders as if the sailors are still running the ship from the afterlife. He raised an EMF detector, and the screen suddenly blinked wildly, as if an unseen force was flooding the room. "Something is here," he said as a shadow darted past the control window, too fast for the camera to catch anything but a blur. A paranormal investigator once captured an EVP voice here that only said 2 words, "Get out, duh." He stepped up to the control panel where a metal dial turned slowly, though no one touched it. "They don't want us here," he whispered, turning to face the heavy steel door, where a slow, steady knock began to echo as if someone or something wanted in. He moved toward the door, but as he touched the handle, it felt ice cold, forcing him to pull back. A staff member said that one night, he saw the figure of a sailor standing right here, staring through the window before vanishing. But the scariest part, he felt cold breath on his neck even though no one was behind him. The narrator entered the sleeping quarters, where stacked steel bunks loomed in thick darkness. His flashlight lit up rusted walls, revealing long scratches as if someone had tried to claw their way out. "This is the scariest place on the USS the Sullivans," he said, his voice trembling as the air turned bitter cold, as if an invisible hand was tightening around him. "Visitors have heard crying at night, the sound of boots pacing, and even seen ghostly figures lying in the bunks as if waiting." He lay down on one of the bunks, his body stiffening as a low moan echoed from beneath the ship's floor, like the sob of a trapped soul. "Do you feel it?" he whispered as a steel door at the end of the room slammed shut, without a single gust of wind. The camera recorded, and for a brief moment, a hazy figure seemed to sit up from the opposite bunk, its pale eyes staring before fading away. A museum employee said that one night, he heard his name called in this very room, though no one knew who he was, he said, standing up, flashlight shaking. But the most terrifying part was when he left. A freezing hand touched his shoulder and whispered, "Don't leave then." He turned back, the flashlight catching a single empty bed gently rocking, as if someone had just gotten up. "They're still here," he whispered, voice fading, "and they don't want us to leave." Thick fog wrapped around the USS the Sullivans like a shroud of death, obscuring the moonlight and making the rusted steel body look like a giant ghost in the middle of Buffalo Naval Park. The narrator stood on the deck, his flashlight trembling as it lit up his pale face, his eyes still haunted by what he had just witnessed. Cold wind from Lake Erie howled through, carrying faint whispers, as if the souls of the 5 Sullivan brothers were calling from the darkness. "We've walked through the most terrifying corners of the USS the Sullivans," he said, his voice low, as if afraid to awaken something lurking. "The deck, where 5 shadowy figures stand silently, staring with pale, ghostly eyes. The control room, where whispers give commands from beyond the grave. And the sleeping quarters, where cries and cold hands make you never want to stay." He turned around, flashlight cutting into the dark, as if sensing invisible eyes watching him. "I've heard stories about the curse of the Sullivan brothers," he continued, his voice quivering slightly, "but nothing prepared me for the metallic knocking in the control room, or the icy chill when lying on the bunk bed." He pulled out the EVP recorder, pressed play, and a static-filled voice echoed, weak but unmistakable, "Don't leave us." The camera zoomed in on his face, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Who's saying that? George, Frank, Joe, Matt, or Al? Or some other soul trapped in this steel tomb? A sound rang out, like the synchronized steps of boots, making him flinch as the flashlight darted across the empty deck, where the fog briefly formed the shapes of 5 figures, then vanished. "USS the Sullivans is not just a ship," he said, his voice urgent, like he wanted to leave immediately. "It's a gateway to the past, where the souls of the 5 brothers and dozens of other sailors remain imprisoned. What do they want? Peace, or a warning?" He walked toward the gangway, but a low moan echoed from beneath the ship, like a cry from the dead. If you've ever visited USS the Sullivans or heard stories about this curse, share them in the comments. Do you think the 5 brothers are really still here? Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell to follow the next ghost hunt. The camera panned out to a wide shot of the ship, as the lighthouse beam swept across, revealing the silent cannons and fog-drenched deck. A final whisper echoed, "Stay." Before the screen faded to black, leaving behind a faint silhouette standing at the corner of the deck as if watching.